over the weekend. And, of course, the Pittsburgh Steelers are coming in. This guy's been on the backfields all week at Owings Mills, and he will continue to be there. I was there with him on Wednesday when Terrell Suggs went into his WWE comedy routine. But we're not here to talk about the future. We're here to talk about the past. The Chicago Cubs are world champions. Luke Jones, pinch me. Tell me that I'm not really having this conversation 25 years into my career.
Oh, it's amazing. And we knew it was either going to be the Cubs or the Indians, and certainly the last few days, it looked, a few days ago, it looked like it would be Cleveland. But either way you slice it, you're talking about baseball history. And it's amazing. As I thought about this, watching what we witnessed on Wednesday night into the early morning hours, Thursday morning.
Well into the morning hours.
Yeah. I was just thinking that this series had the historical context of the two historic doormats of Major League Baseball. For anyone that's 80 years or younger, that's all you know. Indians, a couple pennants, but no world championship since 48.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pushing 50, bro, and the Indians were okay a couple times. The Cubbies had an 84 thing in them, and the the Bilecki year and the Bartman year. But I mean, boy, the Orioles are kind of getting there now. It's been all of your lifetime.
Just
so
for some context, and I was thinking about this. My grandfather passed away 9 years ago. Lived to be 84. Lived a full, happy life. Liked baseball. Rooted for the Orioles.
My father was born in 1919, so so was my mother, and she's 97, and she's on the planet. So
So I was just thinking about this. My grandfather's been gone for 9 years now. He was 84 when he passed. And the Cubs won last won a World Series 15 years before he was born. 10 years before the end of World War I.
My grandfather was born in 07, and my grandmother was born in 11. So, only my grandfather was alive. But, it was, 1907. It's crazy. It really is, and that they never took a down period. They've never moved. They played in the same stadium. All of that is still sort of there, right?
Yeah, it is. But I was just thinking as we watched this game go into the eighth inning, Rajai Davis hits the home run. This game goes into extra innings, and I was just thinking, up until this Game 7 in the series, it had been a solid World Series because it was 3-3, but there hadn't been that epic moment.
It needed a game. It needed Game 7 moments to be because it didn't have great moments the first 6 games.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. There was a couple good games mixed in there, but this Game 7 brought the context beyond just talking about it being the Cubs and the Indians and their historic droughts and their years and years of not winning championships. This was what all baseball fans could sit there and watch and just absolutely revel in what we saw.
Yeah, any two teams, it would have been epic, right? Well, once the rain came at the end of regulation in a tie game in Game 7, no matter what happens at that point, it's epic, right?
Oh, no doubt about it. No doubt about it. But it was just, the ending, the moments, the questionable decisions made by managers on both sides, two managers that I have great respect for. It had a little bit of everything. It really did. The Cubs get to Corey Kluber, and then they get to Andrew Miller. Both teams made mistakes. Both teams had some fielding miscues and some questionable decisions. I didn't get the squeeze play with 2 strikes. That was just baffling to me in that spot. But overall, the Cubs...
It was baffling to Baez, too, by the way.
No doubt.
And he showed his immaturity, but he almost showed up mad. I thought, man... Boy, that's, Madden's an open-minded guy, but I don't know how that's going to, you get the bunt down. You're a professional. Get the bunt down.
Well, I don't like the call there.
I don't like the call there either.
I don't.
That dude had more movement in his ball to be thinking about bunting on one shot with two strikes.
Well, that's the thing. Everyone thinks getting a bunt down is easy, especially.
Well, getting a fly ball up in the air might have been easier for him, right?
I totally agree. But that aside,
we agree on baseball. Really?
Yeah, sure.
Oh, okay.
Hey, why not?
Right.
The Orioles aren't playing anyway.
Who's going to listen to that? You and I agreeing on something.
I know, right?
Exactly.
It's strange, but overall, the Cubs just they did some things that and really over these 3 games. Think about it. Cleveland had so many opportunities in Game 5.
Oh my God, they had a lead.
1 for 10, 1 for 11 with runners in scoring position, something along those lines, just off the top of my head. But it's amazing when you kind of look back over the final 3 games. And look, the storyline is the Cubs break their curse. You know, they end their drought.
And that's
they
not a
win.
bad storyline. We'll live with that.
Yeah,
I'll live with that.
But then on the flip side, you know, there's a tendency to say that Cleveland choked. Is there some truth to that? Yeah, because they were up 3-1. But at the same time, you're talking about a Cubs team that was the best in baseball throughout the season.
If you lose 3 in a row, you choked. Come on.
Yeah,
you did.
yeah, and that's fine. But at the same time, there wasn't a Buckner moment necessarily or anything.
I've had to
like
live
that.
with that since '79, so let them live with it too.
I
Let
know,
Cleveland
right? I was just thinking, at the very least, you'll hear, I guess, less about the We Are Family Pittsburgh Pirates of '79.
Wilbur Darnell Stargell.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. But this was incredible. I mean, anyone who loves baseball was going to be watching this regardless, right? I mean, whether the game...
if they could stay awake. I had a lot of people in my timeline say, damn, I fell asleep at the rain delay. I mean, I almost tweeted out at 5 after 12, like, just wake me up when they start playing again. I don't know when that's going to be. And then you saw that big blob of weather coming, you know, crazily enough from Chicago, right? I mean, toward Cleveland, and you're like, dude, if they don't get this done if the Cubs didn't win it in the 10th and this thing lingered into the 12th, they would have sent everybody home. We would have had to come back and play again, right? I mean, like, because that rain was going to carry on till 3 in the morning, right? I mean, literally.
It sure seemed like it. And it's funny. I mean, the official box score said it was a 17-minute rain delay. It felt a little bit longer than that, maybe because everyone was tired.
Maybe because it was midnight, and I was trying to figure out how to stay awake because I wasn't going to be the guy that fell asleep on Game 7.
Oh, no.
I have fallen asleep on a lot of epic moments in sports in my life. This wasn't going to be one of them. You know, I wasn't sleepy, strangely enough. Like, the comeback, the 3 runs, I woke my wife up 4 times. I was kicking her. I was pushing her. I'm like, hey, you got to wake up. Like, just hit a 3-run home run. You're not going to believe it. The Cubs are going to blow this. And it's the guy that beat his girlfriend. I mean, that makes it even more delicious that guy sucks. So, you know, he's going to have some goat horns to wear as well, but he's also getting a ring. But, you know, I'm an anti-wife beater guy, you know. I mean, and Ray Rice and anything I said on the radio notwithstanding, I was rooting against Aroldis Chapman, and I didn't want to see him win, and I took great deliciousness in him blowing the save. Quite frankly, I did.
No, I mean, believe me, he's not one of my favorites either for the reasons
you got a sister
stated.
and a mother, and I've met them, and you
no
like
doubt about
yes.
it. But at the same time, and you and I didn't talk specifically about Game 6, but I was very much in the camp of, why is Joe Madden having him throw, trying to throw more than one inning in what was a 5-run lead at that point in Game 6, with just the understanding that in Game 5 he had thrown 42 pitches and gotten 8 outs. I put that way more on Joe Madden. Everyone was talking about this. Look, the issue was never going to be, is Aroldis Chapman available? The question was going to be, how effective will he be? With the understanding that he'd thrown 42 pitches on Sunday night, and then you asked him to throw 20 more in Tuesday's Game 6. So that was, to me, more on Joe Madden. But at the same time, I wasn't disappointed to see Aroldis Chapman struggle either. Don't get me wrong. But I mean, the Rajai Davis home run. I mean,
and there's a guy I root for. Boy, I'm in love with him now. Like, I just love the way he played the game in this series.
Well, the funny thing was, though, think about it. He had the plays earlier in the game, didn't get in great position to catch the ball on the sac fly that Chris Bryant scored on. And then in the same inning, the Contreras double that scored Zobrist, Davis didn't get a great read on that ball. You could tell he kind of broke in and then had no chance to catch the ball after that. So he kind of had those 2 issues in center field in the 4th inning, and then clearly made up for it. But that was just a great moment. I mean, again, this goes back to that resonated for people that weren't just Cubs and Indians fans. That was as good of a moment as you'll find, other than Joe Carter in '93 and Mazeroski way back when in '60. It's right up there with just about anything else. The game-tying homer in Game 6 of the '75 series, before Fisk's heroics later on.
There were a lot of heroics to go around. I mean, Ross, Zobrist, Obviously, Bryant at the end. Schwarber, played a hell of a role in this series at 3 more hits. I mean, Dexter Fowler almost, as you and I well know, who would have known that when we were standing next to John Harbaugh in Indianapolis doing a press conference during the Combine, all of our phones went off. Zrebeck, everybody, about this Fowler thing, that this is the way it was going to end, right? Game 7 for him and him playing a massive role in bringing a World Series to the Cubs. I mean, he certainly chose his conscience that day, much to the chagrin of everybody else, but it really worked out well for him. As has the Joe Madden thing, as has the Theo Epstein thing, as has the John Lester thing, as has the Aroldis Chapman thing, by and large. A guy that was toxic at the beginning of the year, that the Dodgers didn't want, that the Yankees hid for a little while, and then dealt off and got a can of prospects. We'll hear, 10 years from now, we'll be hearing about the prospects that were dealt in that deal. So, and a lot of young ball players, man. I mean, I would think the Indians, some of these guys are going to get back there, and we can all say for the Cubs that we'll be shocked if 5 years from now if Rizzo and Bryant and Schwarber and these guys haven't been back to one more World Series. Obviously, it won't be for Ross. Probably wouldn't be for Zobrist either, although he's there a few more years. But this young core, there's a lot of good ball players here. I mean, it really reminds me of an old school World Series where you get to know the players a little bit. You feel like at the end of the series next year when the Cubs come on TV, you're going to have a little feel for them,
Yeah, there's no doubt. And we got a feel for them last year when they made it to the playoffs when no one was expecting it. I mean, everyone was kind of saying, okay, the Cubs are a couple years away, and they came on so strong last year, and then they just went nuts this year. And you just said it. I mean, this is a team that is young. They have more talent in the pipeline coming. They're playing in a big market in Chicago with ownership that, by all accounts, looks like it's going to be, within reason, an open checkbook pretty much. So you would like to think that they can keep their young core intact. I mean, you never take it for granted because, even you think back to the Yankees in the late 90s into the early part of last decade, that core that they had, and clearly they were able to supplement it with outside free agents, other deals they would want to make over the course of season to season. But this Cubs team looks like it's built to be, as close as we've seen to a dynasty as that Yankees team.
Yeah, so, you want to bet next year? Go to Vegas right now. They're the favorites. I promise you
no doubt. And by the way, that doesn't mean they'll do it. It's really difficult to do this.
They almost didn't do it this time.
Yeah, you play 162 games, and then you get into October, and as much as people always talk about teams being built for October, and yes, there's merit to that. Don't get me wrong. It's still, a lot of it does boil down to who gets hot at the right time, and it does become a lot more of a crapshoot in a short series, whether you're talking 5 games in the division series or the LCS and World Series best of 7. But I want to get back to one name you mentioned, Theo Epstein. It's amazing to think about this. Now, you think back to the 2004 Red Sox. He didn't build that team from the ground up. That's very clear. We understand
that. Was Duquette's team, right?
It was, but he brought in Curt Schilling. He made the Nomar Garciaparra trade at the deadline that year. Remember, they had a deal in place to acquire Alex Rodriguez. It was only the Players Union that didn't approve of the restructuring of his deal that he had originally signed with Texas. You just think about the fact that this guy, at such a young age still, but especially back then in Boston, he was the GM that finished the job for the Red Sox, breaking an 86-year curse. He goes to Chicago 5 years ago. He said, look, I have a plan in place, but it's going to take some time, and we're going to stink for a couple more years. That was his message, almost verbatim to Cubs fans who knew plenty about having teams that stunk over the years. But he built this team. You look at the players on that roster, supplemented them with guys like John Lester, certainly, that made the Jake Arrieta trade, much to the chagrin of Orioles fans to this day, and will continue to be.
That was a pretty good trade on his part, by the way.
Yeah. But it's just amazing to think that first he did it with the Red Sox, even if the core of that team was still in place, still did some things to help get them over the hump, and including, by the way, Tito Francona, Terry Francona going in there and doing the job he did. And then to do this with the Cubs after 108 years of nothing in terms of titles. I mean, it's just amazing. I mean, that guy can retire right now, and he's a Hall of Famer, right? You can't do more than that. I mean, I guess you could say, all right, win a couple more championships with the Cubs, fine.
Yeah, when he was born and going to baseball games, and here is a young kid eating hot dogs next to me over Camden Yards, back when I was in the media, Luke. And, if he would have said to me, one day I'm going to engineer the turnaround of the Red Sox franchise and the Cubs franchise, and before you turn 50, I'm going to have rings from both on my fingers because of what I did, I would have looked at him and said,
what do you have in your Coke?
You're going to be a special kid. That's all I'm going to say, man. You're special. That's
Oh, there's no doubt. And for people who are into new age thinking, sabermetrics and more statistical analysis and all that, he's that guy that grasps all that, has embraced all that over certainly to get in that position to begin with. But you also get a sense that he has a great feel for the game as well in terms of people. David Ross, a perfect example. I mean, this is a guy who's been, for the most part, a backup.
He's a lifer Taylor Teagarden to some degree, right? Name any Jeff Tackett, name any backup catcher, any Clevenger that kind of hung around forever. He's that guy, but he's done it by being this good person, apparently, right? Like, he is one of the most beloved dudes in modern baseball. I mean, and he's played with everybody. Like, if you go through the teams he's played on and name the players that he's lockered next to, everybody in baseball's played with that guy, literally.
Pretty much. And certainly a guy who handles the pitching staff well, good defensively. But, I think Theo Epstein, beyond just the statistics, beyond sabermetrics and new age thinking and getting away from just the old tired methodologies and trying some new things, I think he's found a really successful common ground there between old school baseball thinking and adding in new things. And I think David Ross is kind of a perfect example of that. Not to say that he's the biggest reason by any stretch that the Cubs have finally won a World Series, but I think Epstein just gets that, and that's just an example of it. But just incredible to think that Joe Madden, we saw him for years here in the AL East, managing the Rays, and you look at the run he had there with good talent, no doubt about it, but clearly had challenges holding on to players, and clearly a team that didn't have the same means that other teams have to augment their roster in season.
If the Rays had the Cubs' money, Joe would have never left and probably would have won 3 there, right? Literally.
Sure. I mean, the core that was in place there. I mean, there's no doubt. Took them to a World Series.
And the Orioles would have a harder time winning the last 5 years because the Rays would have actually been good too, right?
Well, I mean, the Rays were pretty good at the beginning of this 5-year run for the Orioles.
But for losing as many players, if you go through the roll call of the players that went through there, and then they also had some injury issues. They also had some guys that didn't pan out to be as good as they could have been over that course of time.
Oh, there's no doubt. I mean, they didn't have everything going perfect. I'm not convinced they would have become a dynasty, but you'd think that they would have had a really good chance to not just reach the World Series in 2008 like they did and lose to the Phillies.
Well, shame on baseball. Shame on baseball for having a sport where every time I get on the phone with one of their beat writers, and this is going back years and years, anytime you talk to them, anytime there's a Price or there's name any of the great pitchers, Kazmir, any of those guys have been through there, the first thing you talk about is when they're leaving. Literally. I mean, that's all you can talk about with the Tampa Rays is, he's going to be a one contract guy here. When his time comes, they'll flip him at the trading deadline and try to get a few players because that's the way the Rays do things. And, I give a lot of credit to Joe Madden. I met Joe Madden on a very, very cold, wet night at then Pac Bell Ballpark out in San Francisco during the World Series when he was the guy with the funny glasses in the dugout with the Anaheim Angels. I befriended him. I talked to him every night. He was the most accessible, normal dude. I didn't even know who he was. I mean, I had to look up who's this sort of bench coach looking guy that everybody seems to Pied Piper a little bit. And the next thing you know, he's in our division and turning around a franchise that nobody could have thought to turn around. I mean, he and Friedman, the whole pack of them down there. So this is a great baseball story, right? I mean, literally over the last 2 decades, all of these people, whether it was Theo Epstein coming up in the Orioles organization and going to the Red Sox as a very young man, whether it's Joe Madden, also for Tito Francona, who was, a little bit of a role player himself and the son of a player and, ran off to Philadelphia where they couldn't win for a while. And now is considered in that genius category. Luke Jones joining us here. I want to talk about a thing that I know you're going to put your teeth into here because this is right up your alley. Managing the bullpen in the postseason. I don't know that it's a skill as much as there's some sort of art form to it, right? And not everybody's going to do it the same way. And for either one of these managers, specifically in the last couple of days, what Madden did with Chapman and burning him up, what Tito Francona did in going on short rest for all of his pitchers, which probably did not bode well in games 5, 6, and 7 for him, right? And then having to go to the bullpen. He had to go to Miller early. They fell behind early. There are reasons to sit here if you're in Cleveland and criticize Tito, much as there would have been reasons in Chicago had they lost to say, what was Joe Madden doing? Because as much as we've criticized Buck here for a month and we shall for 4 more, managing these bullpens in these short series, there is no book for this. This is very much a feel thing for these managers on rest. Obviously, Madden thought Chapman had more than he had. There were a lot of misreadings on pitching in this series, in my opinion, for 2 managers that are geniuses at doing this.
Yeah, I don't see it with Francona. I think the reality is they lost 2 of their best starting pitchers, and they had 3 guys that they trust. I mean, what were you going to do? Have Ryan Merritt start Game 5 or something? And maybe they could have. Who knows? But Kluber was always going to get the ball in Game 7. He pitched phenomenally until he got to Game 7. Then he looked like a guy that had pitched on short rest a couple times in a row, and a guy who was making his 3rd start in the last 9 days.
Yeah, he didn't look like Madison Bumgarner coming off of 1-4-7, right? He didn't.
And that's not a knock on Kluber, and honestly, it's not a knock on Terry Francona. I mean, what else are you going to do there? I mean, you got to go with your best, and this is an Indians team that their rotation was ravaged by injuries. I mean, it just was. I'm not making an excuse for them. Certainly they would have liked to have gotten better from Bauer and Tomlin, but what do you expect? It's Trevor Bauer and Josh Tomlin. I mean, it's just at some point you just tip your cap to the opposite side. In the case of Andrew Miller, they finally got to him a little bit, and he certainly didn't look as sharp. There's no doubt about that. About the only thing I would really criticize Francona for in Game 7, I honestly think he stuck with Kluber too long. I think it was very clear about 2, really almost immediately.
It was clear Chapman didn't have anything left, and Madden sent him back out there to lose the game. It was crazy.
And I said, with Chapman, my issue is not Game 7. My issue was using him the way he did in Game 6. He had a 5-run lead, got a 7-run lead, and still sent him out there for the 9th inning in Game 6. That, to me, is what really resonate with me as far as not liking how Joe Madden handled him. And
Arrieta got up in Game 7 for a couple of minutes, man, and I'm like, really? I mean, how many pitches could he have in him, right? But that tells you what a bulldog is, though. He wanted the ball.
Yeah, I mean, I was there a scenario where Arrieta could have thrown 15, 20 pitches, given you an inning? Hypothetically, sure.
Dude, that thing could have gone 15 innings. I mean, it could have, right? I mean, it was starting to get to that point where you had already worn out Lester and Chapman. You'd already gone through Kluber and Millen and Allen and Shaw. I mean, they were already to Bauer at that point where, it kind of ended, and Shaw clearly ran out of gas as well. It really was just about pitching fail in Game 7, which is, I guess, what you would expect that after, this season, somebody was going to give out, and the Indians got the flat tire first, right?
Yeah. And I think, to go back to your question about Francona, the one thing I would have maybe done differently, Brian Shaw sat for, it was probably about, 30-plus minutes from the end of the top of the 9th inning until going out there for the 10th after the rain delay. That might be the one thing that you point to, but at that point, he's out of his bullets, and then he's going to Trevor Bauer. That might have been the solution there, to just have Bauer start a clean inning. Even though Bauer did a really nice job, he strikes out Hayward, it gets Baez to fly out to center, kept it at a 2-run game, and they had a chance. They got the tying run to the plate in the bottom of the 10th. So maybe that's the one thing that I would point to and say, yeah, that might have been the mistake there. But beyond that, I think he really had no other choices. Now, on the flip side, with Madden, the loss, absolute lack of confidence in anyone else in that bullpen other than Chapman, and he clearly had some level of confidence in Montgomery, who was another trade deadline pickup that no one talks about. I mean, everyone talks about Miller. And
yeah, he'll be the guy on the picture on the front of Chicago Tribune, as my pal Bob out in Indianapolis pointed out. It'll be hanging over every urinal in Chicago forever, right?
Right.
The
And
picture
how
of
about
Montgomery.
did not have a major league save until he saves Game 7 of the World Series. Not bad there. But overall, I mean, again, there are things with each manager that you could go back and second guess. I really question the use of Chapman in Game 6. That was a big thing for me, for the exact reason of what we saw. It wasn't that he wasn't going to be available in Game 7. It was how effective will he be, and you saw it. The command wasn't there, and then as the outing went on, his velocity wasn't there as much.
It speaks to his paranoia with a 5-run lead in Game 6, right?
No doubt. It spoke to his utter lack of trust in the rest of his staff. So, but beyond that, I mean, I think if you dwell on that too much for either side, it diminishes what was just a great Game 7. I mean, it was. I mean, the fact of the matter is the Cubs and look, Kluber wasn't as good. You could see his pitches were up, didn't have the same bite, only had 3 swinging strikes in the entire outing, didn't have a single strikeout, which I believe I saw a statistic. I think that was the first time he ever had an outing where he did not strike out a batter. I'll double check that, but I believe I saw that.
Well, he only recorded 12 outs, too.
Yeah, but it just, the Cubs got to him, and then they got to Andrew Miller. I mean, you look at the heroes of the postseason just across the board this October and into early November. Those two guys are right at the top of the list as much as just about anyone else. So for the Cubs to get to those two guys, doesn't that kind of make them deserving to be champions? Just with that
I wanted
alone?
Kipnis to hit one out so bad in the 9th off
As
of Chapman. I just
yeah.
wanted Kipnis from Northbrook, Illinois, to just put the dagger in him. I mean, that would have been what Teixeira never got a chance to do here, but it would have been,
Right.
It was a heartbreaker. But, hey, man, we got a world champion. We got Chicago Cubs. Going to be a great parade. Going to be fun in the offseason. And certainly, you go back to the word trust, and I want to bring the Orioles back into this. You said Madden only trusted literally one guy in Chapman out of the bullpen. Obviously, Cleveland had more trust in Miller than maybe Allen and Shaw, but there was trust. The Orioles season went down when Buck trusted Ubaldo Jimenez over everyone else, which is just – that's the mind-boggling part of it, because when you get into these long series, you really do see who the managers trust. And for whatever reason, Ubaldo Jimenez, after 6 different runs in and out of the doghouse and off to the edge of the roster and off to the edge of Norfolk in the plank with his contract, he was the guy that the Orioles – I mean, it really – a month later, I'm still scratching my head saying I can't believe that's the way it went down, that's the guy you trusted.
Well, it's amazing, especially if Cleveland had won Game 7 – I was already thinking about what I was going to say to you, and talking about this on the air, and I was thinking that the decisions, the bookend decisions, Buck Showalter at the start of the postseason, which he didn't trust Ubaldo Jimenez more than Zach Britton. Buck was thinking ahead too much. He's praised all the time for being 2 steps ahead of everyone else, and that works brilliantly.
Yeah, he had already made the 3rd out with Ubaldo in his mind, I guess, somehow, right?
That works brilliantly in the regular season. You can't do that in that spot in the postseason. I mean, you just can't. I mean, we've talked about it. We'll continue to talk about that.
As we should. I mean, as we should.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. But on the flip side, the decision to use Chapman in Game 6 and then the residue of Game 7 with him clearly not being as sharp, I was just thinking that it's kind of the opposite extremes, right? It's almost as though, and a couple of people, I saw a few different reporters and people I follow on Twitter make this observation. In some ways, you could make the argument that Buck Showalter not using Zach Britton in the wild card game almost created a more dramatic swinging in the opposite direction, where in the case of Madden, too reliant on Aroldis Chapman, and in the case of Francona, and again, a lot of it out of necessity because, beyond Kluber, Bauer, put it this way, Bauer and Tomlin would not have been the number 2 and number 3 starters had their rotation been healthy in October. I mean, that's obvious. It would have been Salazar and Carrasco. I don't think any doubt. But still rode Andrew Miller very, very hard, and the same thing with Allen and Shaw. And it just seemed like all of those guys ran out of gas a little bit at the very end, which, you expect. It's a long season. It was a long postseason and a long 7-game series. So, I don't know how much criticism's really warranted as much as, in the end, the Cubs just played a little bit better than Cleveland certainly over those final 3 games. And again, I'll go back to if I'm an Indians fan lamenting having blown a 3-1 lead, I go back to Game 5 as much as anything else and think, man, they sure had opportunities to close that thing out and never let that series go back to Cleveland, and they weren't able to do it. Credit to the Cubs. They were the best team in baseball throughout the season, and just terrific Game 7 theater, right up there with any other Game 7 I can think of. Certainly a couple years ago was entertaining. I think in 2001, my personal favorite of my lifetime that I remember, that 91 series with the Braves and Twins.
My boy Tim Wendell wrote a book about that, right?
Yeah,
it's a great book. We had him on this week talking about it.
Yeah, but this Game 7, ranks right up there with just about anything in the history of baseball. The two teams brought the more eyeballs to the table in terms of people being interested in this series in Game 7 and knowing that one of these teams was going to win. But in the process, we were treated to a fantastic baseball game.
On a weekend when the Steelers fans will certainly be inside of our ballpark to some number on Sunday, absolutely alarming that the city of Cleveland opened the floodgates for 30,000 people to drive over from Illinois and sit in their ballpark in Game 7. Somebody tweeted out, and look, man, I know if you're selling your tickets for $2,000 and they're your tickets and you do whatever you want, but boy, was that ass backwards. And that's something that was really kind of unforgettable to me. It was one thing for our fans to go up to Foxborough. We had a couple thousand of us up there, and I know it was a pretty good time, Luke, as well, when we went to the Super Bowl a couple of years ago. But
sure.
This is... I couldn't get over. I can because I know how much money the Cubs have, and I know how I've been to Cleveland. You've been to Cleveland. There's not real fans in Cleveland for the Indians. The ballpark sat empty, much like our ballpark did for most of the year here. But to sit there at Game 7 and see 25,000 Cubs fans in the stadium, they've waited 60 years to have a Game 7 there. I don't want to say it was disturbing. It's a tribute to the Cubs fans and to their finances and to their caring about it, but PU Indians fans in Cleveland, that wasn't a good look. It really just wasn't a good look.
Oh, sure. And I saw guys like Darryl Ryder, who, as we know, a big, diehard Cleveland fan. In addition to being in the media out there covering the Browns, it's what you just said. Look, there's a financial element to it that was huge. There's no doubt. The ticket prices were so lucrative, but at the end of the day, you kind of sit back and you say, well, am I a sports fan or not? Do I really care about my team that much or not? And the Indians. We talked about the Orioles, who were 10th in attendance. The Indians were 13th, and the Indians won their division, and they kind of won their division going away. So. I don't know what to say about that.
Yeah, if that doesn't make you a baseball town that you went to Game 7 of the World Series to keep your tickets. But, I pointed this out, Luke, and I know this to be true because I know how tepid the Orioles' interest is. We do this for a living. You sit in a half-empty ballpark all the time. If the Orioles played the Mets or the Phillies or the Pirates or, whomever, and the ticket prices got whatever north of $400, $500, $600, $700, wherever that would be, I don't know that our fans would necessarily say to a Pirates fan, sure, give me $2,000 for the pair. You can come and sit in my seats for Game 7. But that's what happened in Cleveland the other night. And given the right circumstance here, but, if it would have been the Cubs here, people would have found $49 flights into Reagan or into Dulles, and, the Cubs fans had more money than the Orioles fans. They would have bought the tickets. There would have been a lot of Cubs fans. And now, it's one thing to get in the car and drive. It would have been different if it was in Seattle or something. But it really was... It was a tip of the cap to the Cubs fans, but whew, what a bad look for baseball, I thought. Bad look for Cleveland and for baseball, I thought.
Yeah, when the Indians did things, it got loud. It was clear it wasn't a complete takeover. It wasn't as though they had 30,000
as much of a takeover
fans
as you're ever going to see in a Game 7 of the World Series.
No doubt. Believe me, I agree with you. It was not a good look, and I saw people from Cleveland that I happen to follow on Twitter that were absolutely livid about it. But, that aside, there is something to say about Cubs fans making that trek. And you look at Chicago, just the population that they're drawn from. And let's face it, the Cubs, for as god-awful as they've been for much of all of our existence, they do have a following.
Everybody in the Midwest has a Cubs hat, right?
Yeah.
I got you.
I mean, there's some appeal there.
It's the least offensive thing you can wear. I mean, you don't offend anybody except maybe a couple Cardinals fans, and they hold a fistful of rings up and laugh at you, right?
Right,
so,
exactly.
It's like being a Browns fan right now. Like, who's mad at a Browns fan or a Jaguars fan at this point, right?
Right, exactly. So maybe, and look, it's not a good look on Cleveland, no doubt, no doubt about it. But at the same time, you kind of look on the flip side and say, that's pretty impressive from Cubs fans. But at the same time, if you're not going to, if this isn't the time that you're going to go to all lengths to go to a World Series game on the road,
then when?
When are you going to do it? So hey, hats off to them, and the Go Cubs Go thing throughout the postseason was pretty cool to watch that as someone who didn't have a dog in the fight either way.
Seeing Bill Murray that happy, for crying out loud.
Oh, sure, no doubt. So this was just this was fun, and again, for a World Series that lacked that epic kind of game to it, games 1 through 6, some good ball games, but nothing that terribly memorable. Game 7 will just, regardless of the Cubs winning, I would have felt the same way if Cleveland had won in extra innings. That was as good as it gets, and as much as you think of the Cubs as winners, baseball won on Wednesday night. As cliche as that sounds, and I hate using cliches. I try not to use them anyway, but I felt like baseball won because there were a lot of eyeballs watching that game who wouldn't have been watching otherwise because of the two teams that were involved, making this a little bit different, and they were treated to a really good game. So pretty cool to see that.
Off-season is here. How will Mr. Angelo spend his money? And Dan Duquette and Buck Showalter off the back end of the Britton Ubaldo fiasco. We got plenty of baseball ahead as well as football. Luke is on the backfields in Owings Mills for all things Ravens as we head into the Steelers game. And you can find him, Luke, at WNST.net, as well as Baltimore Luke on Twitter. I am Nasty at WNST.net, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook Live as well as our YouTube, WNST TV channel. The Buy a Toyota Audio Vault is there for you 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world. Pete and I think Luke are going to be out Monday night at Buffalo Wild Wings in Owings Mills. Our guy Niels is coming to town this weekend. We're throwing a big party on November the 12th. All the information is up at WNST.net. The morning newspaper hits your email inbox at 7 a.m. each and every morning. That is powered up by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com. And Dennis will be here on Thursday, every Thursday, driving you home from 3 until 5. The WNST text service is there for you when the Orioles hire a pitching coach, when anything happens with injuries this weekend. We have plenty to talk about with the Ravens. We're going to get to that. We are WNST.net AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.